Thank you, Celia. You really are very kind in your intro words to Rory and I. So just to outline what we're going to do, um, we're going to have a bit of a chat. I think we're going to enjoy it, and if you do as well, then so much the better. Basically, there are going to be four chapters, each of 10 minutes, so four sort of pre-assigned topics, and a bit of back and forth. So I'm going to kind of interview Rory for the first chapter, and then back and forth a bit. But the premise of all of this is obviously about thinking differently, which has many aspects, and we're going to try and cover a few. I think it was Einstein who said the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So hopefully this is a good brain juicer to how all we can think a little bit differently. And then we have got a couple of pre-registered questions, so we'll try and remove some of those, and then we'll find our way through some of the questions. I can see also already, Chris, your question coming in here. I would say up front, neither of us are the very best timekeepers that the world has ever known. So we'll do our best to stick to that. But you know, lots of caveats and provisos in that. But nonetheless, let's get started. So first off, I'm going to ask Rory about his spin on thinking differently. And I suppose the obvious thing, Rory, is you've sort of made best part of a good career out of this notion that things that seem absurd are actually very sensible and very commercial. So what's the value of thinking differently to you?
Well, I suppose the first thing is very simple observation, which is if you look at 10 really remarkable and successful businesses, and you imagine that they didn't exist, and you imagine trying to launch them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's worth remembering that you would have faced an extraordinary level of skepticism. Dyson would be one example. If I'll be honest, I've got a fair old appetite for counterintuitive ideas, but if someone had come to me and said, I think there's a market for a £700 vacuum cleaner, I would have kind of gone, yeah, I think this guy is slightly unhinged, to be honest, because you look at the vacuum cleaner market, it's a distressed purchase. It's a grudge purchase in many cases. You only really buy one if you're forced to move out of rented accommodation. You try and blag one from your parents if possible. Have you got a spare one? It's not like we're going to get a great thrill out of vacuum cleaner purchase. And if you looked at the market, you'd see kind of the Henry at the left and the Miele at the right, and the sweet spot, the center of the kind of Gaussian distribution of vacuum cleaner price would be around sort of £170. And you go, okay, this guy's deranged, essentially. And then if he said, no, but wait, you haven't heard about my idea for the £400 hairdryer, that's when you would have actually got him shown out of the building, really. But then on the other hand, he's a billionaire and I'm not. And I could make the same case about Red Bull. Cost a fortune, comes in a tiny can, tastes disgusting. Okay, I can make the same case, bottled water as a category. I grew up, at a time when the only person in Britain who had bottled water was the Queen, who I think travelled with the supply of Malvern water to avoid stomach upsets. But that was basically it. If you bought bottled water when I was a kid, you were some sort of nut job. Okay, you could look at, for example, Zoom. When Zoom launched, everybody said, perfectly rationally, they said, look, guys, basically, you're up against Facebook, Google, Amazon. All of the big tech players already have a video conferencing platform. Skype was bought by Microsoft for $1 billion or so, and they're free. What on earth makes you think you can make a go of this in a world with a freemium model when you're up against these tech giants who are offering competing products for zilch? And funnily enough, the most recent one I've come across is Gusto, in a way, which I don't know if anybody else is a convert. But I actually met the guy who founded Gusto. It's now worth about £1 billion, by the way. And I met him, and he got in touch with me and said, he was very interested in behavioral science. I'll send you a Gusto box. Now, I'm not so rude or so ungrateful that I turned down free food. And I wasn't going to say, I don't want your stinking box of food. But I must admit, I was fairly skeptical. I thought, well, okay, I've got 6 cookbooks on my kitchen shelves, or 10 or 15. My wife is largely the guardian of those things. And I've got the whole Elizabeth David and Claudia Rosen and this and that. I've got an Ocado account. I can get a recipe from a cookbook, order the ingredients from Ocado, make the meal. What on earth does Gusto achieve for me? Now, the extraordinary thing is this box arrived at gousto.co.uk. If you're very good on the chat, I'll send you a recommendation code for a half price first box towards the end of this talk. So that's an incentive to hold on. But the strange thing is, this box arrived, and I ended up making 4 meals, which were totally delicious. And I suddenly realized, okay, when everything arrives simultaneously, you actually make a kind of, reasonable sort of high quality. It's particularly good for ethnic food, which of course has lots and lots of fiddly little spices and things. And it's unlikely you have all of those in stock. And I realized in a way that all of these things are kind of behavioral tech. They're psych tech. What they solve isn't a logistics problem. It's not that we can't get hold of food or that we can't get hold of cookbooks. It's that by making the process simultaneous, you end up cooking far more high quality meals at, by the way, a totally sane and healthy quantity than you ever did before. And actually, when I investigated it a bit further, I discovered that although cookbooks basically support the publishing industry, you'd be better off buying your mum a copy of the Kama Sutra for Christmas, to be honest, if you wanted her actually to implement the advice contained therein, because everybody buys cookery books, and a tiny, tiny fraction of people make more than one recipe from every hardback 20 quid book they receive. So this solves the behavioral problem. It's a coordination problem in a way. I think that Uber, the great genius of Uber at the beginning, was the map, which was a psychological problem. It wasn't that we really minded waiting for a cab. It was that we hated the state of uncertainty. That business of, is he here yet? Maybe he's parked around the corner. Oh, hold on. They said 10 minutes. Why isn't he here now? And the little map with a little picture of a car on it doesn't solve the problem in objective terms. It doesn't make the car arrive any faster, but it completely solves the problem in psychological terms. And I suddenly realized that what people actually want, what those unspoken, unthought, unmet needs are, in many cases. No one before Starbucks was going around going, why can't I spend $3.50 on a cup of coffee? Why does this coffee have to be so cheap, right? Okay, nobody before this explosion, I don't know if this is a bit of a male one, but the Turkish barber craze. There wasn't anybody in market research saying, I really like my barber, but I just wish he'd flick burning methylated spirit into my ears. You never got that, okay? And so you suddenly realize that our unmet needs are not only unmet, they're kind of unthought and they're unspoken. And that's because we want things for reasons other than the reasons we can rationalize. And yet we have this extraordinary bias within business decision making, which is the quality of a decision is basically assumed to be proportionate to the extent to which it makes sense. Okay? And in many ways, your risk of getting fired doesn't depend on the quality of your decision making in business. It depends on the quality of your reasoning and your argumentation. And I think that's a really dangerous conflation in many cases, because to quote my colleague Chris Graves, who founded the Ogilvy Center for Behavioral Science in New York, just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's true. And just because something doesn't make sense doesn't mean it's wrong. And we have this incredibly strong human urge, I think, to make sense of the world, that we need to construct usable maps. And it's a little like if God didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent him. We need kind of religions and rules and common patterns by which we can lead our lives. And I think we leap to these much, much too quickly, because we go, why does that happen? It's because of this. Right, done that, done the explanation, nothing to see here. Toothpaste, why do we clean our teeth? Because we want to prevent dental decay. And yet if you look deep down at the real behavior of toothbrushing, it's really about fear of bad breath much more than it is about dental health. Dental health is the official reason. That's the reason you give in court if you were asked to explain why you had cleaned your teeth that morning. And that's probably how the human faculty of reason evolved. It was to effectively defend ourselves and explain our behavior to other people. And so we just come up with one plausible reason and then we stop. But actually, why is all of the world's toothpaste flavored with mint? I don't even like mint. Well, nothing beats mint for a feeling of having a fresh mouth and fresh breath. So do you actually clean your teeth after lunch? No, you don't. Do you clean your teeth before you go to bed? Probably not. Do you clean your teeth before you go to work, or before a date, or before sex? I mean, if you're in a relatively recent relationship, that is. Almost certainly you do. And so you realize that the real deep down amygdala reason doesn't really map onto the official reason at all. And since the whole job of marketing is to find and satisfy unmet needs, and unmet needs are unvoiced and unthought, then it means that marketers can't be confident operating in a world where everything has to make sense straight out of the gate. That's it, basically.